Hey guys, it's Melinda from MTZ Crew Designs. Welcome back to another tutorial from the Paint Couture creative team. Okay, so have you ever looked at a tic-tac-toe board and thought, this needs more drama, more gold, and significantly more stress? Well then congratulations, you're in the right place. Today I'm taking you down the rabbit hole to show you how I created this Alice in Wonderland inspired tic-tac-toe board. I used Paint Couture paint products and iFlex wood products, and it looks really cute. It looks whimsical, and it looks like it behaved itself. It did not. So let me show you how I pulled this off. Okay, so what I'm using for the tic-tac-toe pieces for the board is several of these Alice in Wonderland molds that I have, some of my favorite ones. And I'm going to use Paint Couture's Rapid Casting Resin. This is a really cool product because you can pour your resin appliques in your molds, and they're done with, I would say, within 10 to 12 minutes, they're done. But it's a really simple process because you just pour step 1 and then you pour step 2, and you just do a 1-to-1 ratio, so equal parts. And you can see it's kind of clear as I'm pouring it in right now. But then when you add the other step, it becomes kind of opaque. And so you have to stir that up. And I stir for probably about 30 seconds. And you see it gets kind of foggy there. But the more you stir, it'll start to become clear. So you want to stir until you see it become clear, because then you know both solutions have mixed up thoroughly. So I stirred left to right and right to left, and now you can see it's becoming more clear, and that means that the solution's been totally mixed up. And then I'm going to put my popsicle stick to the side here and start pouring the into the molds. So this rapid casting resin is such a cool product. It actually comes in a new color now. There's an ivory color now that's just kind of like an off-white beigey color, and then there's also the black and the white color. For this project, I'm using the white one. And here's just a little tip for me. When I'm pouring resin into my molds, I like to keep a little baby wipe handy, because as I pour some of the resin out of the cup, it can sometimes start to drip down. And if you let it drip down, it can start to cause a mess and make it a little harder to pour into some of the precise areas that you're trying to pour it in. So after each pour, I do wipe off the cup on a little wipey just to give it like a clean surface to pour from. And then if you ever miss a spot or you don't fill it in all the way, use your popsicle stick and just move it around, right away after you pour it, so that it does fill in the entire mold area. Oh, and I do strongly caution that you wear gloves when you're dealing with the rapid casting resin, because it's extremely difficult to wash it off if you get it on your hands. And so now they're done, and they probably dried for about maybe 10 or 11 minutes, and they're ready to come out now. And so that when we're playing this game, I wanted people to have the option to have whichever character they want to be for the game. So I actually made like 5 of each character. Okay, so the next step here is called the base, and it's also known as the false confidence phase. I started out with this heart-shaped board. It's just a heart-shaped piece of plywood from the All Paints product site, and I'll link that down below so you know where to find that. So yeah, starting with the heart-shaped board, because nothing says strategy game like a shape that immediately complicates math. So next came the tic-tac-toe grid. 9 sections, straight lines. What could go wrong, right? I measured, I remeasured, I stared at it from different angles like it owed me money. And this was just super complicated because I wanted to make sure I had enough space in each square for each different kind of tic-tac-toe piece that I made. Some of the pieces are smaller than the others, and some are just weird looking shapes. So this was a challenging part right here. But I finally got it figured out, and so I just wanted to measure exactly on the board where I was going to put the iFlex wood applique. And pro tip, nothing exposes your emotional stability faster than trying to make 9 equal squares on a curved surface. Eventually, I committed because, like Wonderland, once you choose a path, you're already lost. Okay, so this is where iFlex wood appliques come in, and honestly, they save the day. I use them to create raised grid lines, adding both dimension and forgiveness, because if something's slightly off but it's raised in gold, suddenly it's intentional. I glued everything down carefully with some wood glue. I let it cure, and then I reminded myself that patience is a virtue I occasionally pretend to have. So, remember when I talked about stress? This is exactly the point when I realized I really need to just slow down and just take a breather here, because I went through all the trouble of mapping out the black and white checkered pattern that I was about to paint. And then I realized I was using a 1-inch tape, and that's a lot of squares. And so I immediately felt intimidated and I scratched that plan. So let's fast forward to here. This is where I pulled out my white paint and I decided to paint the entire board white because I'm not going to go through the trouble of erasing all that. So I painted everything white using purely white from Paint Couture's acrylic mineral line. And I put about 2 coats here to make sure I covered up everything really well. And then I left that to dry. So this is where I wised up and I pulled out my 1.5-inch painter's tape. And I am doing the same thing. Essentially, I am laying down these stripes and I am outlining each side of the tape, going horizontal and vertical here to make a square grid line. Or I think it's actually called a checkered grid. Potato, potato, whatever, you know. It was a little challenging over the iFlex wood trim that I had set down there in the middle, but you just have to work with the tape and just kind of finagle. Is that a word? Is that the right word? I know you catch my drift. Okay, so once all the squares have been drawn, then I went back through and put a letter B in every other square on each line. So you can see they're not right next to each other, but they're on every other square. And this is the fun part. I wish I was joking. No, seriously, this is the most challenging part for me, I think, because I am so blind and it's very hard to paint a very straight line with a black paint over white paint when you're blind. So I'm going to show you how I did this. So I'm using a very small, flat, pointy brush, and I'm using the pointy end of the brush to kind of guide the line. And what worked for me was putting the pointy end of the brush in the corner of each square. And I'm not putting a lot of paint on my brush, just putting a little bit, not a whole lot. So it's probably best to practice this if you haven't ever done it. It's probably best to practice on something, some random piece of wood or piece of paper even. But with that pointy end of the brush, I'm gliding it across the line. Okay, so I'm using pitch black. This is from Paint Couture's acrylic mineral line. And what I love about this paint is it has extremely awesome coverage. So as you can see, I don't have a whole lot of paint on my brush. I'm really not even dipping it back into the can very much, but I am just gliding what little is on my brush across that straight line. And it's really important that you just define the line first. And then as you have the line defined with the paint, then you just want to drag your brush inwards into the square to spread out that paint. You don't need a whole lot of paint. That's the really cool thing about the acrylic mineral line. It goes a long way and the coverage is amazing. I don't really even need to put a lot of paint here in each square. So if I could make like top recommendations when you're painting these checkered squares, Number one would be your lighting. Make sure you have really great lighting, particularly if you're blind like I am. And then number two, your brush. Your brush really matters. It should be a flat brush, and it should not have a lot of paint on it, but that brush is really going to make a difference. As you have spots that need to be touched up, you can even use a much smaller brush to do touch-up spots. And then the final thing would just be patience and fun. Like, just be patient with this process, have fun with it, and just remember you have to trust the process. And I'm only going to paint this one square for you because, to be honest, I had to go off camera and hold this board up to my face because I could not see these lines to save my life. So the rest of it was painted off camera because I genuinely needed that much focus. And I forgot to mention, but the point of putting the bee in each of those squares was a visual reminder for me when I am painting, because it can start to play with your eyes a little bit if you try to do this without guiding yourself. So putting that bee in each square gave me my my map, I guess you could say, of where I need to put the black paint. Okay, so now I want to paint the back of the board, and I'm using one of the new luxe metallic colors from Couture. This color is called Love Potion, and it's such a pretty pink. I love it. I love all the luxe metallic colors, but this is such a pretty new color, and I'm just using this to cover up the back of the board. Couture's luxe metallic paints have such intense brilliance, and they're super concentrated, so you don't need a whole lot, but they're really pretty, and the metallic shine is next level. I love it. I don't think you'll find any of my projects where I didn't use any type of metallic paint. Okay, so the next step was the game pieces, because why not make this harder? The board itself just simply wasn't enough. I also created custom tic-tac-toe pieces. They're all matching, they're themed, and they're adorable, and just detailed enough to make future me question this decision entirely. At this point, time officially stopped working, which is, I guess, very on brand for Wonderland. I'm using a variety of different colors from the Acrylic Mineral line and from the Luxe Metallic line. So they're all so fun and adorable, but I have to say that there is one here that's my favorite, and it's the white rabbit. So I'll show you a little close-up here of how I painted him. I used buttercream from the Acrylic Mineral line to paint him in the entire resin applique in buttercream first. And then I went through here on these little hearts that are on his jacket, his little Queen of Hearts regalia jacket. I used Love Struck from the Luxe Metallic line to paint the hearts. And I'm using like this super fine tip paintbrush. It's like the finest tip paintbrush I could find in my stash. But I'm using Love Struck on the hearts, and then I'll use some of the other metallic colors to paint some other details here. After I've got all the paint on all of my tic-tac-toe pieces, I want to protect them, and so I'm going to use the Extreme Guard top coat from Couture. This is in the finish gloss. I want to use a gloss finish because several of these are painted in a metallic paint color. So in order to keep that sheen and keep that metallic hue on the pieces, I'm going to use gloss just to keep them all uniform and shiny. And now for the fun part. And by fun, I mean decision paralysis. I added Wonderland imagery with several transfers. I'm adding some playing cards, some clocks, teacups, mushrooms, drink me moments, and all layered carefully so that each square felt intentional, but still playful. Every time I added one element, I questioned all previous life choices, though, to be honest, but also I loved it. And so this is what it looks like. This is what the front of the board looks like. And I'll show you the back here. That pretty Love Potion pink, it really pops. I love that pink. Okay, now that all of the transfers are on here and they're secure, I'm ready to add a little bit of gold pizzazz here. This is the moment where you feel powerful again because gold fixes a lot. Gold forgives mistakes. Gold whispers, you're doing great, even when you're not. So I'm hitting all of these edges of the iFlex wood pieces here with some gold gilding wax. And then I'm also going to use gold gilding wax on the edge of the heart. Okay, so now it's time to seal everything up here because at this point, this board and I had been through too much together. So let's preserve it as long as we can. So I'm starting off by kind of stirring the resin inside the bottle here. You can pour it in a cup and just stir it, but I just stirred it while it was in the bottle, just gently turning the bottle. And then you pour it onto your piece. And I'm starting in the center because I really just like to tilt my project left and right to allow it to drip and move all over the place. It kind of helps that this iFlex wood trim is here because it kind of helps to guide me. And I'm just kind of working in sections here. So I prefer this stuff to be kind of thick. You can use a silicone spreading tool if you want to. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. But you can use a silicone spreading tool to spread it around your project. But I just prefer to kind of tilt my project all over the place and just get a good amount of coverage and then allow it to drip off. And that's what it's doing here. I'm just tilting it until it covers every part of the top of the board, and then as it gets towards the edges I'll let it drip off. And then I have this super professional tool behind here. If you know what that is, you know what it is. But I set it on top of that little plastic bag thingy, and it just raises it off of my tray so that if any of the resin is sliding off of the board, it will fall onto the paper underneath and it won't, get muddied up underneath my project. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing here, just allowing it to spread all the way to the edges. And I do get all the excess off and just use my hand to kind of wipe off the edges at the end. You do want to wear gloves when you're handling this because it's super messy and you don't want to have to worry about getting that off your hands. But I love this product so much. The finish is so glossy, it's so pretty, and it's so worth it to me. So this is a little bit of an extra step to take, but if you use it, you'll understand why. It's a great product. You can use Paint Couture pouring resin on canvases, other types of furniture tops, any flat surface that Paint Couture products would adhere to. So once it's fully dried, it is super durable, has a super high gloss finish, and you can just create dimensional looks with it. You can put it over German glass glitter, you can put it over transfers, over decoupage paper. It's very simple to use. It's incredibly strong as a top coat, as far as top coats go. And it is non-toxic. It does take about maybe 2 to 8 hours to dry. Just kind of depends on how much you're putting on your project and how thick your layers are. But for me personally, I actually leave this to dry for a minimum of 12 hours just to test it and make sure it's dried. And I usually don't even touch my project until the following day. So I give it that much time to dry. And you can repeat the process and put another layer on if you'd like. But if you do put another layer of it, just wait until it's completely dry. So I did actually wait 24 hours before I added another layer here. And I used it on the top of the board and on the back of the board. And here it is. This is the finished Alice in Wonderland tic-tac-toe board. It's equal parts playful, dramatic, and slightly unhinged. You can play it, or you can just stare at it and whisper, "We're all mad here." This project was harder than it looks, messier than I planned, and absolutely worth it. I'm really pleased with it. I made this for my daughter because we love playing board games together, and she's also an artist, so she appreciates the effort I put into this. If you enjoyed this trip down the rabbit hole, don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments. Would you actually play this or display it forever? Well, thank you for creating with me. And remember, in Wonderland, the rules are optional, but gold is always mandatory. Thanks, everyone. Have an awesome day. Bye.